Hello, I'm going to show you how to put fractions in simplest form by listing the factors of a number and finding the greatest common factor. Let's start with the fraction 4/16. Let's start by writing the factors of 4. My factors of 4 are 1 times 4, 2 times 2. Now let's write the factors of 16. The factors of 16. 1 times 16, 2 times 8, and 4 times 4. Now let's find out what our greatest common factor is. We see that they have 1 in common, they have the number 2 in common, and they have the number 4 in common. We want to take our greatest common factor. Well, our greatest common factor is 4. In order to put this in simplest form, we now take the 1 from 1 times 4 and put it over top of this 4, and you now have 1/4. 4/16 in simplest form is 1/4. They are equivalent, but they are also now in simplest form. Let's look at the fraction 8/24. Start with your numerator. Let's find the factors of 8. 1 times 8 and 2 times 4. Now go to your denominator. Let's find the factors of 24. 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8 gives me 24, and 4 times 6 gives me 24. So let's find out our greatest common factor. We see that they have number 1 in common, they have the number 2 in common, they have the number 8 in common, and they have the number 4 in common. But which one is the biggest number they have in common? That would obviously be the 8. So in simplest form, I take my 1 as my numerator, the 3 is my denominator. I've now placed 8/24 in simplest form. And in simplest forms, it is 1/3. They are equivalent. Let's try one more. Let's take the fraction 16/24. Since we just used 24, why not? Make it a little easier. Let's write the factors of 16 first. I'm going to put them in order from smallest to biggest. 1 times 16, 2 times 8 gives me 16, and 4 times 4 would give me 16. Let's find the factors of 24. Well, I know that 1 times 24 gives me 24, 2 times 12 gives me 24, 3 times 8 gives me 24, and 4 times 6 gives me 24. I would not keep going and write 12 times 2 because I already have 2 times 12, which is the same. Let's find out our greatest common factor. We see that they have 1 in common, there's number 2 in common, they have a 4 in common. I don't see a 16. I do see an 8, so they have that in common. And we've already talked about the 4, they did have that in common. But our greatest common factor would have been 8. So in simplest form, my fraction, I take 2, and I'm going to put it over top of 3, and in simplest form, I have 2/3. They are equivalent, and that is 16/24 in simplest form. Let's try one more. Let's start with the fraction 10/15. So 10/15. Start with your numerator. 10. The factors of 10 are what? 1 times 10 and 2 times 5. Those are the only factors. Write the factors of 15 now. 1 times 15 is 1, and 3 times 5. Those are the only factors of 15, so let's find out the number that's the biggest one that they have in common, which would be my greatest common factor. They have 1 in common. They do not have a 2 in common. They definitely do not have a 10 in common, but they do have a 5 in common. Circle your 5 because that's your greatest common factor. So in simplest form, your answer is 2, and put your 3 as your denominator, so 2/3. These are equivalent. 10/15 is the same as 2/3. You can do this for bigger numbers as well. Let's take the fraction, let's find one big, 24/36. That's a big one. Let's start by writing our multiples, our factors of 24. The factors of 24, 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. I'm not going to put 6 times 4 because I already have that. I'm not going to put 8 times 3 because I already have that. So these are my factors of 24. Now I'm going to write the factors of 36. The factors of 36. 1 times 36. 2 times 18. You may not know that one, but that is a factor of 36. 3 times 12. Those are the factors of 36. And 4 times 9. There's one more, 6 times 6. So let's find out the biggest number that they have in common. They have a 1 in common. They have 2 in common. They have a 3 in common. They have a 4 in common. They do not have 24 in common. I do see a 12. I don't see an 8. And I do see a 6. So the biggest number that they have in common was 12. So in simplest form, I'm going to take my 2. That's my numerator. I'm going to take my 3 as my denominator. So in simplest form, 24/36 is the same thing as 2/3 in simplest form. That should make putting numbers in simplest form a little bit easier.